All right, hi all, my name is Sam Phillips, and today I'll be presenting 3D food printing. And before we begin, I'd like to just say why I chose this. So I have an interest in 3D printing. I actually brought some cast of some cookie cutouts I did, and I'll show those around later. And I also love baking. But before we get into what the problem is, I'd really like to develop the context of what 3D food printing is. Could anyone read some of those definitions? You.
3D printing, the manufacturing of solid objects by the disposition of layers of material, such as plastic, in accordance with specifications that are stored and displayed in electronic form as a digital model.
Has anyone ever done 3D printing? Well, how did you use it?
Me?
Yes.
I used it for props for my costume, for cosplay and stuff.
It's really nice to use. Charlie, you did FRC, didn't you? Did you all ever use 3D printing? I presume you were more on the software side, but
yeah, more on the software side.
Yeah.
I believe that there were a couple 3D printed parts, but I wasn't really part of that process.
Yeah, and just to let you guys know a little bit about 3D printing and what its traditional strengths are, I'll do a story about when I first got into 3D printing, which was in cookie cutouts. I'll pass this around after I say what I need to say. But so I started out with, I wanted to do the Charlotte symbol as a cookie for sugar cookies. And this isn't actually my initial design. My initial design was much more flimsy. I didn't have this backing. And so I said, okay, well, I need a backing. And this cost maybe 20 cents. And that is the strength of 3D printing. You can rapidly prototype changes without affecting, I didn't have to make a metal cast. I didn't have to order something. I could rapidly decide what worked and what didn't. And does anyone see the initial problem with this? Because this wasn't the finished design.
Little.
It's little, and also, if you're pressing down into wet cookie dough, you lift it up, oh, it's still in the cast. There's no way to apply pressure like in a normal design where you can just lift off. So this was my finished design. I used a lot of different techniques, and I looked online. There's this wonderful website called the Thingiverse, which is kind of for hobbyists. And what you'll see in a lot of 3D printing is that there's a heavy hobby focus. This is a niche. And with 3D food printing, you'll find that it's a niche within a niche. It is not used a lot. It developed in tandem with 3D printing, but it was primarily by hobbyists and research teams. And I'll start with you, Brian. You can just pass those around so you guys can maybe see what 3D printing looks like. Yes?
Are these actually made out of 3D printing?
I 3D printed these in the makerspace last year.
Do you know what was made out of it?
I do not remember.
Probably like PLA plastic.
Yeah, probably.
Are these on sale anywhere? The cookie cutters?
No. You can find, after I'd made that one, I found a similar design, but I didn't like it so much. That's why I added the stronger center, because I found the one I found on the Thingiverse.com was too weak. So I made my own modification. But you can find something similar out there.
I want to buy yours.
I'll have to find the file, but I'd love to do that.
Serious, yeah, I'm serious.
Can anyone read the definition of 3D food printing? Ryan.
3D food printing. In the context of food, 3D printing involves layering edible materials, often in extrudable form, to create customized shapes, textures, and even entire meals.
So what I found about 3D food printing is that I spoke about that traditional strength of 3D printing is rapid prototyping. There's no use for that in 3D printing food. Yes, yes. It's the one from Jurassic Park where the big noise happens. What's that one called? Yeah, that's it. And what I found is that since 3D food printing does not leverage this, it leads to a lot of problems when we're talking about investment. And also, extrudable form, what that means is you have to make meat paste, you have to make flour paste. And has anyone ever had 3D printed food?
What does it taste like?
Well, it tastes a little bit interesting. I'll show a video later, and I think you guys will understand.
Does it do anything inside your body once you consume it?
Well, it's just meat. It's just meat paste. It's just normal ingredients usually. All right.
Just hope it doesn't lead to a cause of death.
So to understand the context of that problem, we need to first go into kind of a timeline to see how it developed in tandem. So in 1986, Charles Hull developed the first 3D printer. It was modern. It was a very kind of rudimentary machine. But he got it out, he patented it, and you can see years later is the first kind of real use of 3D printing. Wake Forest, right here in North Carolina, printed the first human organ. 3D printing has a lot of uses in the medical field for printing organs. But in 2002, it finally entered the industrial scene. And this is 3D printing, not 3D food printing. Boeing integrates it into their design process to rapidly prototype and to accelerate the design process to cut out cost. 2006, Cornell University 3D prints food for the first time. And I think that really demonstrates where 3D printing food comes from. It is research focused, it's heavily niche, it's mainly a hobby. 2013, the first 3D printed burger cost $330,000. Anyone want to buy it? Now, that pretty much illustrates that this is very expensive. It's not like Star Trek where they're going to have a replicator and, you know, just beam it down. I've never seen it, but I assume that's what happens. 2015, they tried to make the first commercial food printer. It failed. They had this really big idea that it would be like an appliance, like a microwave, and something that you could just, I want a steak, and it would print it out. But there's no interest. No one wants that when you can just make a steak on a grill. This is, as it stands, 3D food printing is a more expensive, more time-consuming process that doesn't even leverage the traditional strengths of 3D printing. So, by 2020, commercial and public interest in the food printing industry remains limited. And so that's the problem. The problem is that 3D food printing lacks investment and just general interest. No one is going to invest in something that doesn't have a perceived use case. Like the Segway. The Segway was a massive failure, but at least have the perceived use case that, oh, we can use this for, yes?
I was going to ask, the second one, you see the second one right here, is this actually made from a 3D printer before it was edited, or is this actual?
That is an actual 3D printed. So one of the big things that 3D printing food is used for is custom chocolate designs, but it's so niche because you can just make that in a mold.
Do people get sick with the consumable stuff?
No, they don't. It's just chocolate coming out of a needle. So it's completely the same as eating regular food. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mentioned the use case just now, but there's technological insufficiencies. It cost $330,000 to print a burger in 2013. But I'd say this isn't a major problem because, like we said, that burger would now cost around like a premium cut of meat, probably. It's very much so cheaper and more efficient. I mean, you guys can see some of the Beyond Meat stuff in stores. Supply chain issues. Making extrudable meat paste and flour paste is actually quite difficult. That's not stuff you can purchase. You have to develop that in-house or get it from other people. And the biggest reason is there's no use case. There's no impetus as it stands. This all leads to an investment dearth or a lack of investment. So the purpose of this speech is to explore how we can generate that use case, how we can use it, and make it something that will actually be useful and get funding. So what is the solution? These. Does anyone know what these are? But what specifically? Beyond Beef. Did anyone go to Sovi this morning? Oh, that's right. You guys are sophomores.
I'm a junior.
I'm lucky Wake Forest pays for my meal plan. But the thing is that they had this Beyond Beef, Beyond Sausage, and it almost tasted like the real thing. It was really impressive. But the way you make these is you 3D print them. You use 3D food printing to make lab-grown meats and use them to make plant-based meats because it is necessary for the texture and to develop the cells and the fiber so that it tastes like a natural thing, so that the texture is right. Yes.
But is this what they be selling over at grocery stores?
Yes, when you see like Beyond Meat and Beyond Ham and stuff like that, it is.
So they never actually like kill the animals to make those.
Nope. They're made from soybean and they're made to feel like meat and to hopefully taste like meat. Yes.
So as this becomes more viable, as someone with like a very severe soy allergy, if like that was the future and like we only could have meat that was soy, how would we? Is there other alternatives we can make?
There's peanut based. There's.
Also learn to peanut.
Damn. I guess you'll die.
Well, we'll see.
There's lab grown meat too.
So all this time, since we were all grocery shopping with our parents, especially our moms, it was supposed to be buy like meat products. Those are not actually made from actual dead animals, right? What I meant was there's not meant where we like kill the animals that we, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Could you like the normal meat you buy in stores, like
yeah, just in general.
that's from dead animals.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
Beyond
Yeah.
Meat is just more of a vegan alternative.
Yeah. Thank you. So this is a video that showcases some of the ways that you can. This shows actually a beef printer by a startup called Redefine Meat. I'll begin it. The sound isn't very important, so I'll set it up as we go. Doesn't it look tasty?
Startup is hoping to establish its product as an alternative to conventionally produced meat. Redefine Meat operates large-scale meat printers at its Rehoboth headquarters south of Tel Aviv, as well as in a new factory in the Netherlands. Manager of the company's 3D printing project, Yaron Eshel, explains how it works.
When I want to make my thing, I have a library of a few different steps. I can choose each one of them and I can adjust it accordingly. I can define the amount of marbling, the external fat, of the external fat. And now I can start on the printed and so I'm putting in this is my field, it's my final for today. I know now with something from now I need to refill the machine with new material. But now I can go directly into the printing process. And you can see how the process starts to build layer by layer.
The company makes its products from ingredients including soy, pea protein, chickpeas, beetroot, nutritional yeast, and coconut fat. Co-founder and chief executive Eshel Ben Shifrit.
All right. I think that's enough. I just wanted y'all to to see what it looked like. And would anyone eat it?
Nope.
Yeah, see, you'd try it, but it probably wouldn't replace, because it does look kind of disgusting. It looks like a bunch of strands of meat. Just, yes.
Quick question. In that video, how long does it usually take to procure like one of those?
So like 30 minutes to an hour.
Minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they usually make those like in like sheath, like
Oh, okay. Yeah.
like they cut it. Like they'll do it constantly.
Okay.
Just the machine will always be on. So I guess time is kind of really thing. But I hope that you'll see with this that traditional meat making is inefficient, it's not scalable, and it's kind of reaching the limits of what it is. There's just a quick fact. Do you know why the Amazon is being cut down, what that land is being used for?
Money.
Griffin? Yeah, true. It's grazing land for livestock and also agricultural for animal feed. What is it? There's another fact. By the way, all these facts are in that link right there, that reference. 80% of agricultural land is used for animal feed. It accounts for around 20% of global calories. That's incredibly inefficient. And what you'll see here is cultured meat. Cultured meat is meat grown in a lab. It's more highly experimental than plant-based, but it's also used 3D printers also use cultured meat. And I think the graph kind of speaks for itself. energy use from cultured meat is down from beef. Beef is by far the worst. It's the one that's being compared to, in fact. Greenhouse gas emissions, if you don't know, does anyone know why cows produce so much methane?
When they, fart and shit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, but it is a big contributor to greenhouse gases. Land use, lab grown meat doesn't require any land. Water use, cultured meat doesn't require nearly as much water. It's down by 98%. And that's because you don't need to devote all the other processes that an animal goes through. A cow normally has to have so much more energy put into it. I think, let me find, like a study at Yale found that it took 25 calories of feed to produce 1 calorie of beef. This is an inefficient process and it's not scalable. We are reaching the limits of traditional meat making industry because I don't want to paint, ranchers and people in the beef industry as, evil people. They're responding to a market demand. I think it's on consumers like us to provide other alternatives that use less, that are more sustainable and have less impact on the environment. And similarly, you'll see energy use. You'll see cultured meat actually has a higher energy use than poultry. That's the one downside of this. It is incredibly it's energy inefficient compared to plant-based products.
I kind of have a theory about this. Do you think in the future, if they somehow feel bad for selling off the animals to produce meat to sell it to their consumers, are they going to replace the actual animal meat with 3D printing meat in the future?
I think that's like a bit speculative. Do you have a response to?
I don't know. I said another question.
Oh, I'll answer this one. I think that's kind of speculative. I mean, I don't want to make like judgments on what future ethics will look like. I think it will be primarily driven by need because the human population is still growing. Meat consumption is on the rise and those people are going to respond to that demand. So I think using plant-based alternatives and lab-grown alternatives will come from more like an economical and resource-based perspective rather than a moral one. But that's all speculation. Who knows? Yes.
In regards to energy usage, most early stage tech is very inefficient, right? Would you say that this tech, if further investment is put into it, it could become much more efficient and,
I think so, because the thing about cultured meat, what this is being compared to, is that cultured meat is very research focused right now. It's in the R&D stage, but plant-based stuff like what Beyond Meat typically uses is actually much less energy use, much less greenhouse gas, much less land use, much less water use. Because remember, the water use of beef, sheep, and pork, it's not them drinking it. That's taking into account the animal feed. And as we mentioned before, it's highly inefficient use of animal feed to beef calorie ratio. So who is benefited? There's more options for meat consumption. That means lower prices. It reduces the strain on the current traditional meat making industry. And that means they probably they'll be incentivized to cut down less, use less land, because, we do live in a capitalist society. We aren't hoping that people do this out of the kindness of their heart. We want to give them an incentive to do something that we want. The environment, as I said, 3D printing, plant-based proteins, lab-based proteins helps reduce resource use, lower emissions, and ease the strain on unsustainable food production systems. And as I said, this relates to 3D food printing because all of these use 3D food printing. That's the use case for 3D food printing. And as I've demonstrated here, I think this problem is only going to get worse, and the need for a plant-based foods is only going to increase. And allows scalable food production to sustain population growth. And I'd like to add an additional point. Does anyone know what countries are looking into lab-grown meat and plant-based food? No? Yes, it is Israel and Singapore. Both countries that are concerned with their food security. Nowadays in the U.S., there's a lot of R&D focus because we are worried that allies that we get our agriculture from, to get cheap food might be fickle. And so this is also an issue of national security. Sorry, I had a question. And so when we talk about food printing technologies, we're also talking about, national security issues. This is scalable and it's vertical. Lab-based meat development is a vertical farming method. Any questions?
So I actually have a question about like the price versus like the price for this 3D food printing. Since it's mostly soy-based, how is this any different than just like making a bunch of tofu?
So essentially in taste, because people don't like tofu. You always hear people complain when there's a tofu meal option, and you can also make the texture like beef, like chicken. So it's essentially a different way of doing it.
When
Yeah.
you say cheap or cheap?
Cheap.
Or cheap?
Cheap.
Cheap. Cheap.
Yes.
Okay, cheap.
Yes.
So what I've noticed through even on the shelves and the presentation that there's a lack of seafood, like as far as development. Are they trying to do that, or is it
They are trying to do it. It's a texture thing. They're trying to emulate beef, and they're still having troubles with that. Like I had in the dining hall earlier, I had a Beyond sausage. I can now talk about that. It was interesting. I took one bite and was like, wish I didn't grab this. But, my mom didn't raise me to waste food, so I ate that. Yeah. And so it should be noted that it's a percentage of impact. Beef is the one being compared to. So you're right that it's nice, but I just want to say that's 100% at everything. No.
Over time, let's say 10, 15 years from now, technically be the same, sort of the same height.
So this isn't like this is percentage to make like a pound of beef. So it's not like this isn't the total amount of impact, because well, that'd be kind of a useless statistic since lab-grown meat isn't used very much now. Oh, sorry. So this would stay the same. Like the energy used to raise a cow from baby to slaughter is not going to change unless we start genetically modifying cows, which I think is outside of the scope.
Let's say we do want to get higher quality, right?
Yes.
Or higher quality meat or lab-grown meat. That require more energy, and I mean, I guess it won't require a lot of land use, but energy would basically be the same for all of them, or even more compared to all the others.
So that's the worry with energy use in lab-grown meat right now. It's a highly energy-intensive process, but it's still it's in the R&D phase. Beef is never going to get lower in energy use, but cultured meat has the potential to decrease energy use. All right. I hope that answered your question, John.
do you know if we're still getting the same micronutrients from like cultured meat compared to like regular beef?
So there's not the most research on specific health benefits, but theoretically, and what the experts say is yes, we do, because what you're doing is you're growing it, in a test tube, not a test tube, obviously, that would be too inefficient, but you're growing it in a vat and you're producing that into a meat paste. So theoretically, it should be the same, but it is unknown.
So then wouldn't we be putting our hands into like our lives into like the hands of a bunch of like scientists who can control what meat we're getting, and if like say tariffs happen and so, like Israel's producing it, right? And Israel just lifted some tariffs off of us, but let's just say they put something on that meat. Wouldn't that affect us pretty bad over here as well, right?
It would. It should be noted, Israel is developing the technology, and that's why I think the U.S. should start investing in a domestic food printing market. I'm sorry, my mic. Can you restate your question, please?
No, it's just like why can't we start producing our own meat here? Like what's stopping the U.S. from doing their own cultured meat, or even like stocking up on livestock
Well, I don't think that's out of scope. I think when it comes to the U.S., we are a post-industrial economy, which means if you go by, I don't think we have the total fertility rate to do that, which is how many births per deaths. We don't have the worker base to support more agriculture. I don't think that, because that is the point of a tariff, supposedly, is to build up a domestic production base. I don't think we can do that. I think we need to find other solutions. And I think, when you say like putting hands in like scientists, I think there is a concern. I think there is need for some regulation in regards to it, but not enough regulation to where it limits the technology and limits development. I think a lot of people say that with AI, and I think there's a need for, just like AI, I think there's a need for regulations to make safety, but I don't think there needs to be regulations to prevent development. Aljo, I knew you would have something to say for that.
So, building off what John said, transportation of these developed the energy of usage chart include that, or is it just using like the amount of energy to produce that?
It does actually. It's not energy use that is measured through that though. It is greenhouse gas emissions, like transporting it. But typically lab-grown meat, because it is produced usually in a country, it's not shipped from Israel. That means that the energy use and the greenhouse gas emissions are usually less than shipping it from, beef, across state lines or national lines. No, you're good.
But let's say that we're shipping to a third world country, is it still the same greenhouse emissions compared to the other ones?
Yes, in terms of transport, it would be the same. But the overall process is still more efficient in terms of energy use, greenhouse gas emissions, land use, and water use. I said energy use. I need to clarify. In terms of energy use, poultry is more efficient than cultured meat. However, for soy-based products, it is better than all these across the board. All right. Are there any more questions? Yes.
Yeah, so I know John mentioned earlier about if they could keep the micronutrients intact. I was also wondering, I know beef at least has some adverse health effects for some people. Like if you're genetically predisposed to heart disease, I believe certain red meats can make your risks worse. Do you think that it's possible for, scientists to remove, those adverse effects while still keeping the nutrients intact?
They are trying. It's something that they often, when I was reading studies on it, they often tout, but they don't have any evidence to back it up. So I think at this stage, it's a bit more speculative to say what they could do. I'm using the word speculative a lot, I know, but this technology is, when it comes to culture meat, it's very experimental at the moment. Soy-based, plant-based foods have a lot more research done on them because they void that energy use concern, which, these are vegetarian companies. Usually their customer base and the people who even create the companies are concerned with the environment. So they have a lot more emphasis put on plant-based proteins. Yes.
So going back to that conversation that we were having of regulating this.
Yeah.
I know this is just regular culture, and I was going back to the Brazil thing. They inject the chicken down there with hormones that are banned here in the U.S., but they still ship them. What promises can be made to the U.S. regarding that? Oh, this chicken or this printed meat isn't affected at all by anything.
I think that's why we need to develop our own domestic capabilities, because this also requires a lot less laborers to use. And I think that's why domestic production in terms of lab-based meat is essential. In addition, it's often touted by scientists, lab-based meat contains none of the pesticides that are found in animal feed, none of the sort of things that are touted as bad for animals, bad for the normal meat we consume, because it can be a clean process that can be monitored at all times. Yes?
Sorry to ask another question, but you mentioned earlier that it was like vertically scalable. So say you would want to make a industrial plant, like say in the US or whatever. I don't know if this is out of scope, but how exactly would they go about that? Is that just like a matter of setting up, lines of many printers or like just like any manufacturing plant?
It's making growth vats is kind of a disgusting term to use. It's kind of an unscientific term, but it would be setting up growth vats, making this cultured meat at a better scale that is more land efficient. Yes.
I know that there's a bunch of farmland in the Midwest that isn't being used as being held by like other outside countries for absolutely no reason, but they're not doing anything with it. Why can't the U.S. just go in, buy that farmland, and then use it to produce their own meat? Not the culture itself, but
just normal meat production.
And then keep it with their country to sustain ourselves more.
I think we could. I think that is necessary. I think avoiding cutting. Again, the purpose of food printing is to alleviate strain, not to replace. So I think exploring other options for alleviating that strain using stuff that is already being developed is also necessary. I think it's necessary to explore multiple solutions to the problem. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. All right. So I believe we were on to here. So the conclusion, so the micro and macro benefits. So micro is localized production. You can have meat cultures and you can just print meat here that is more localized, that decreases the transport costs of shipping it to facilities for the US. Now for, as Alvajoy mentioned, for third world countries and shipping it to other places, they would still have the same amount. But the hope is that the overall energy use would still be more efficient. More choices, hopefully cheaper choices in the short term. In the long term, it might be a reconfiguring of the the livestock industry. But I think that's a bit more speculative. Precision prevents overproduction. This is just a small point. You can hopefully make more precise amounts of each meat and be a quota, but I think since this will be in the hands of companies, that's, a more loose benefit because we can't, in the US, we definitely have an aversion to regulating how much people produce. Macro, hopefully a global reduction in CO2 as more and more production is shifted to plant-based or lab-based meat printing methods. I think natural resource conservation, I think water, because it is incredibly water inefficient. Traditional livestock, so the hope would be that there would be a shift and that this would supplement because the human population is still growing. We have not plateaued yet, and we have not certainly reached carrying capacity. If we want to keep on unchecking human population, like the Green Revolution did and, all these agricultural revolutions did, we need to find a new solution. There's a lot of, to bring it back to history, does anyone know who Thomas Malthus is? Oh, yes.
He was a British philosopher thinker. He was concerned about overpopulation.
He was. He figured that the world could only hold like 700 million by his numbers. And he was in the 1700s. He was before the Industrial Revolution. He did not predict the Industrial Revolution, the rise of refrigeration, the rise of scalability. What I think we say when we say the Earth is going to reach the carrying capacity, this is the maximum amount, and then we're going to start having famines, water wars, all these sorts of things, is that we ignore that there are technologies that usually facilitate the rise of us to go beyond that limit. This happens a lot. In my point of view, this is the technology that allows humans to keep on scaling their population and to hopefully prevent famines and prevent water wars. And macro, less strain on traditional agriculture. Like I said, if you want to have a steak, I think you should still be able to have a steak. I don't see this replacing it anyways. It's just going to hopefully take some of the pressure off of ranchers and agriculturalists. Farmers, that's probably a better word. All right. Thank you. There's my LinkedIn if you want to scan it.